I will start with Dr. Jayesh. So Dr. Jayesh is the pharmacovigilance county head and the qualified person for pharmacovigilance coordination lead for Bayer Pharmaceuticals and consumer health in East Africa. He's based in Kenya and coordinates pharmacovigilance activities across East Africa as well as the Northwest Africa country clusters. And before he joined Bayer in the year 2013, Jayesh was the head of Medicines Information and Pharmacovigilance Division at the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, and where he served for 10 years, a long time. And so, achieved a lot, and he actually is the one who initiated and developed the National Pharmacovigilance System to ensure the quality, safety, and efficacy of health products and technologies in Kenya. And as much as Jayesh has been instrumental in setting up Kenya National PV System and providing the country an EPV case reporting system, he has also played a very important role to also initiate the formal clinical trial evaluation applications, provision of medicine information, and healthcare professionals and the public. So integrating, PV basically in the public health programs. He has been a member of the Africa Vaccines Regulatory Forum, that is the AVAREF, and a member of various public health programs, technical working groups, as well as WHO team consultants on PV in Africa. So he also is in the industry now, so he also is the current focal lead at the industry, and at the national level, at the EAC level, at the Africa continent, generally regional, international, to sum it all up. So he has also served at CAPI on pharmacovigilance governance matters. Until recently, he was actually the chair of the Pharmacovigilance and Medical Affairs Committee. Such a long thing, but we thank God for you, Jayesh. Please clap for him. Yes. And the next one is Dr. Maina, who is an esteemed professional in the pharmacy sector with a wealth of experience spanning across both public, private sectors, and non-governmental organizations. Her multifaceted career positioned her as a unique figure in the pharmacy sector and demonstrated a profound commitment to enhancing patient safety. So she is the patient safety lead for Sub-Saharan Africa at Boehringer Ingelheim. And in this role, she has demonstrated exceptional leadership and expertise, successfully implementing pharmacovigilance systems across those 5 African countries. Prior to that role, she held significant roles at the Dawa Life Sciences and Merck Healthcare, and her roles within these organizations, particularly in regulatory affairs and PV functions, have significantly contributed to her insights in the field. So she's a member of the International Pharmacovigilance Federation, and her academic qualifications are equally impressive. So she has a Bachelor of Pharmacy, a residency in Global Health Pharmacy Practice, postgraduate diploma in Clinical Pharmacy, and a Master of Public Health. So she has done lots of publications, research publications in peer-reviewed journals, and she has a wealth of experience towards dedicating and enhancing patient safety and public health. So you can appreciate that our panelists today are knowledgeable in the field of PV. Then finally, I have Dr. Christabel Khaemba. She's the head of pharmacovigilance at the PPB, and she's now a PhD candidate at Karolinska Institute. And she's basically focusing, her PhD is focusing on pharmacovigilance in neglected tropical diseases. She's the outgoing vice president of International Society of Pharmacovigilance in Africa, that is the ISOP Africa chapter. She's a member of the African Medicines Regulation Harmonization Technical Committee on Regulatory Capacity Development in Africa. She has extensive knowledge in PV systems globally and has a keen interest in strengthening PV systems within the region and contributes to a pool of trained PV specialists. So we're going to delve into detail about this PV, capacity building of PV specialists in Kenya. I think Professor Kalebo touched on that yesterday. So currently, she's focused on strengthening PV in mass drug administration programs, of course, in line with the PhD she's pursuing. And she's passionate about patient safety and has supported the implementation of patient reporting in Kenya. A round of applause for her. So thank you very much. I know we are familiar with what PV is all about. Monitoring safety, patient safety is very key. So we monitor, we evaluate adverse events so that we get to understand these events better so that now we prevent more harm to our patients. So we are talking about approaches to, advancing PV in Africa. And I think I'd like to start our discussion on what are some of these approaches that, we can use towards advancing pharmacovigilance in Africa. I know we are aware about PV and, in some countries we have it, at the initial stages, others are much more advanced, but in Africa we would like to see, PV move on to the next stage. So we'll talk about partnerships as one of those approaches towards advancing pharmacovigilance in Africa. And probably I'd like to engage Mercy. Patients have become more and more aware about the medicines that they take, the diseases that they are suffering from. They are aware about, the side effects that, eventually they may end up experiencing. How does, patient support organizations contribute towards PV and probably advancing of the same in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much for providing this platform to have this discussion with you. And Martha, thank you so much for the questions. With regards to patient support groups and the role that they have played, I would just like to maybe walk through a brief history of how patients have become a stakeholder, because I think there's been a lot of talk about, what national regulatory authorities do, and now we're at a point where we're telling patients to actually take the front role in trying to enhance patient safety and pharmacovigilance, right? And this has been something which has been advanced from the late 90s to the early 2000s, where we've seen that patients, because they are the key stakeholder, they're the ones who are taking the medication, they become a focal point in trying to express what are the consequences, what's the significance, and what's the burden of these medications that they're taking, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who take these medications. And the reason why this has become quite focal, it's because of, let me give 3 reasons why it's become essential to use or to have patients take a central role, and in a focus to be this patient-centric pharmacovigilance. The reasons have been, as you've said, Martha, is there's a lot of patient awareness in terms of disease conditions. There's Dr. Google, and therefore patients are becoming more aware of the medications that they are taking, and they look into the data of the experiences that they have. Secondly, we've had patient advocacy groups, and these are groups that have gone out of their way to educate patients and their caregivers about disease conditions and the medications that they're taking. And then thirdly, we have national regulatory authorities which have gone out of their way to increase the channels through which they communicate to these patients and giving them the opportunity to report. For example, like in Kenya, we have the PPB, which has given there are different channels to report adverse events, and therefore you can see there's this patient-centric approach in terms of pharmacovigilance, just trying to ensure that patients are given the opportunity to speak about the medications that they're taking, the experiences that they're having, right? So we've seen a lot of people take this patient-centric approach, and there's been a lot of focus on this whole patient journey, trying to understand what experiences that these patients have, and therefore you can see, for example, the World Patient Safety Day for last year, whose focus was, and the slogan was, elevating the patient's voice, to show that patient support groups, patient advocacy groups are key stakeholders in trying to enhance pharmacovigilance. So that's the role that patient support groups and patient advocacy groups have played in pharmacovigilance.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think now I would like to jump over to Dr. Christabel Khaemba. I know the PPB works very closely with public health, programs and the healthcare professionals at the county. We cannot, disregard the role of the county governments in terms of, safety monitoring and what have you. I don't know. I would like to hear perhaps the perspective of PV at the county level, the public health programs, and perhaps what is the role of healthcare professionals when it comes to ensuring patient safety and protection of public health.
Thank you, Dr. Martha. So, as we are aware, we know that when it comes to matters pharmacovigilance, it's a all stakeholders engagement. That is right from the patient to the healthcare workers to policymakers. So as healthcare providers or healthcare professional, it's important that we look at pharmacovigilance as our day-to-day activities, because the narrative for the longest is that when it comes to pharmacovigilance, this is extra work I'm doing. But then for me, pharmacovigilance starts right at the point where you start interacting with your patient, when they start telling you about how they are as you're making the diagnosis. Why? Because whatever medication you're picking, you have to ensure that it is the right medicine for the right person at the right dose at the right time. So basically, pharmacovigilance starts at that point when you're interacting with the patient. So as healthcare providers, it's important that we take extra time just to understand the unique needs of the different patients versus the medication that we are giving them, and just making sure that should they have any issues, we also communicate this back to the National Pharmacovigilance Center, so that at the end of the day, depending on the data that we will have as a country, we'll be able to come up with treatment guidelines which are country specific based on the needs that we have, ensuring safe, quality, and efficacious products are given to the patients. In terms of public health programs, this is one of the key stakeholders, especially when it comes to safety monitoring. I know traditionally it's been more about access, ensuring that the people have access to the medicines, but now the narrative is shifting from just availing the products to the patients and also finding out how are they reacting to this medication once they are home. And we know the uniqueness of public health programs. We have some like the vaccination programs, the mass administration programs, where these products are being given to people who are not sick. And we don't know if they have any other comorbidities, which again, we don't know if they're using any other medication, and we could have things like drug-drug interactions, food-drug interactions, and considering where we just give them the medication at once and no one is following them up. This underscores the need of having pharmacovigilance in it. And I'm happy that we have, like right now, even the neglected tropical diseases, where we initially didn't have pharmacovigilance as a key component. We are seeing that globally, it is with guidance from WHO, it is being embraced. I know traditionally the TB, HIV, and malaria program have already been having systems in place. And the other thing again, we know that public health programs are well funded. So when they are coming up with their master plans, safety monitoring should be a component that is included so that the public can also have confidence in whatever programs and interventions are being given to them. And as I finish, in terms of how does the county governments take up the role in it? So, for example, in Kenya, we have 47 administrative units, whereby through PPB, we've been able to nominate 47 representatives. We are calling them county focal persons. And the county governments, when you look at the rules that were gazetted in 2022, we are supposed to work in collaboration with them to come up with PV. And this also, when you go across East African community, I'll use that as an example, countries like Tanzania and Uganda, where they have regional offices. And basically, this is just to try and bring pharmacovigilance down to the people so that each and every person contributes to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christabel. Now we'll need to hear about, the marketing authorization holder, so the pharma industry perspective. Perhaps Dr. Jayesh, you could tell us, in advancing PV systems in Kenya and in Africa generally, how can the marketing authorization holders, or generally the pharma industry, collaborate with the national regulatory authorities towards advancement of the PV systems? And even as you discuss that, we have academia, we have research institutes that are well represented in this room. What is the role of academia and research institutes, towards advancing of PV system? Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. When we look at market authorization holders, I look at market authorizations holders from an angle that they implement what guidelines, rules, regulations have been provided and set by the authority, right? So the authority sets this up, we comply. We comply, and it's not just for the sake of complying, but we have to comply, right? Because this gives us a license to operate. What I mean by license to operate again is, on a periodic basis, the regulator has the right and should visit the market authorization holders and inspect them, right? Because remember, on one side we have the market authorization holders who are manufacturing the medicines. On the other side, we have the regulator. In the middle is a patient. But remember, neither the market authorization holder or the regulator have seen or interacted with the patient. We do this through the group of healthcare professionals that we work with. This is where the distance between us with our patients and our doctors, our nurses, our pharmacists, is the same as the distance between the regulator and the same patient, doctor, pharmacist. There is perhaps a closer distance by the regulator because the regulator can go in, right? Market authorization holders have to be far away, right? But we have systems. Honestly speaking, when I transitioned from being a regulator to being regulated, a whole new world opened for me. I said, Guy, there is so much here we have to do. We have to be compliant to this in this way, right? For us, it's easy to set up something, right? But to remain compliant is not easy, especially in a situation where we are in Africa. And it's good that you are bringing up academia from that matter. I believe the cornerstone, the pivot that we have here is the academia and the research institutes, if I was to make it broader. Our next set of patient safety champions will only come from our colleges and our universities, right? We, the three of us here, will grow more white hair and we will retire. It is the academia that is going to guide us what's coming in the future. And from what I've seen here in the last 2 days, superb, right? There is just so much opportunity that we have to really raise the profile of pharmacists. And here, I look at pharmacists as patient safety champions, right? There is so much that we can do. Coming back to market authorization holders, by you giving us this license to operate, we have to make sure that our internal standards meet or surpass what the basic national regulation is all about, right? So this is important to us. We have to make sure that that same medicine, which is a life-saving medicine, reaches the final mile, right at the home of the patient, in the right quality. It is safe and it remains efficacious all through its shelf life, right? And I can only see an opportunity when we talk about academia, research, health authorities, development partners, we look at market authorization holders to try and work together. The only reason all of us here today are in this hall is for that same patient. The patient remains the same. Everything else can change. How you do it with a left hand or right hand doesn't matter, right? The patient remains the same. So that's my take. I think market authorization holders and regulators need to work more closely. Of course, we have to respect the barriers that we have, but it is only together that we can make this happen with the pivotal support from our academia and our research organizations.
Thank you so much for that very rich input. So, Dr. Christabel, I know you are currently the member of the African Member Regulatory Harmonization, Technical Committee on Regulatory Capacity Development in Africa. Perhaps you can tell us how we can leverage on the, the regional economic blocks, development partners, and, the WHO in terms of PV, and, in country and also in Africa generally.
So as I mentioned earlier, one of the underfunded activities, of course, we appreciate has been pharmacovigilance. And, but due to the voice that it's getting, people are now coming to the realization that pharmacovigilance is part and parcel of us. And through the African Union, the AUDA NEPAD, it's really been key, especially in trying to strengthen pharmacovigilance within the continent. And taking in cognizant the fact that we have limited resources. Through the African Medicine Harmonization Program, we've had regional economic blocks. And for example, we have the East African community, we have the IGAD community. So looking at these countries, we see that some have advanced to a certain level, whereas some are still coming up, still setting up their systems. So basically, drawing from these two recs, and this can be replicated within the other regions, is coming up with like technical working groups where people come together and exchange knowledge based on the different aspects of pharmacovigilance, and then also having these great minds sit together, coming up with things like harmonized guidelines, harmonized policies, which can be either adopted or domesticated by the countries. Again, we take cognizant of the fact that all these countries are sovereign states. So despite the fact that they work together, they still have to respect also the rules and regulations within their own countries. And like right now, again, you'll find that the RECs can come together and pool resources together. Like for example, we have an EDCTP, that is European Development for Clinical Trials Protocol grants, which an example is what we have called the Proforma project, which takes care of Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. And this basically has been key in creating capacity within the regulatory authorities. And I happen to be a beneficiary, and through that capacity building is how I'm able to do my PhD. And I have 4 other colleagues from the countries I've mentioned who are also doing the same. It has also supported so far 8 countries that are 8 students rather who've done their masters. And one of the key outputs has been trying to build systems. Like for example, Kenya was the first country to come up with the masters in pharmacoepidemiology and pharmacovigilance. Through this project, we've worked together, and now Tanzania has implemented a similar program. So in the past, we've had students from Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania coming to Kenya to do the course. But since it's a bit also expensive for them because they have to be away, but right now, since the course has been implemented at Muhimbili University, it becomes easier now to build capacity also in Tanzania. Ethiopia is also planning to do the same. And with this, we are able now to build capacity around the continent. And then also through the AU, AUDA, NEPAD, They are coming up with a training program that will be aimed at capacity building, especially the regulators. And the reason why they are focusing on the regulators is because the National Pharmacovigilance Centers are housed within the regulators. And they are also now, we work together with members of the academia, and like for Kenya, we have Professor Okalebo, who is part of that team also. And this just helps the countries to be at par with what the continent needs. So depending on whatever training that the training needs, the universities are able to take part of this. And this is just a way in which some of the collaborations can be done to enhance pharmacovigilance within the continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christabel. I think you even had started tackling our next approach, which is capacity building. So in country, I've had the team, the panelists mention about the different stakeholders. We've mentioned the patients, we've mentioned the healthcare professionals, we've mentioned the marketing authorization holders. What are we doing in country? What are some of those, gaps, and what strategies perhaps can we put in place to motivate or, sensitize these different stakeholders to do the reporting? And maybe you could also touch on the regulator, giving feedback mechanisms. Because even as we receive these reports and we evaluate and monitor towards prevention of further harm to our patients, how do we go about this? Maybe you can talk a bit on that.
So PPB, in collaboration with the University of Nairobi, has been building capacity. So where the product safety department gives honorary lectures to the master students and also to the undergraduate, just to bring them to par on what pharmacovigilance is all about and what is needed. And to me, this is one way in which we are building capacity, so that by the time people are graduating, they are able to know that they need to have this as one of the key components of their day-to-day activity. So we also have an in-service module where we work together with the county governments to just train people regularly, giving them updates on pharmacovigilance. And this we've done with support also from development partners like CHEB, MTAPS, USID, USP, and just to be able to reach out to others. And we've also been able to, we developed a module now specifically for the market authorization holders, that is the qualified persons for pharmacovigilance training. And I know Dr. Mercy was among the first cohort that were trained. And this is just trying to bring people together so that they get knowledge on what is required and what they need to know. And how do we now motivate people in terms of reporting? And I know every time we talk about the feedback issue becomes a thorny issue, because this is where people say, why should I report if there's no feedback? But we've tried to put mechanisms in place. I know one of the biggest challenge, and we'll appreciate, and this is an issue that is there in Africa, where we do not have like adequate personnel. So you find that the small number of personnel that you have still has to take care of huge populations. So one of the ways is by having the focal persons in the different regions, whereby we use them as a form of where they can pass back information, because you find that they usually have quarterly forums, and this is one way where they can give information. So we also have updates that are put on the website, and this is basically to help people that anytime you can go to the PPB website that is in Kenya, to be able to see what is happening. And I believe most countries, most regulators are now having such forums. And then recently we started media engagement, and the reason why we think media engagement is key, because they reach masses. PPB might not be able to reach many people, but when you engage the media, we have people who have different radio stations, TV stations as their favorites. And once we build capacity of the media, for them also to help us in passing out information without being so sensational, because we know they also want something that will sell. But we believe this is one of the ways in which we can use and even encourage the members of the public to be able to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khaemba. Just to expound on what Dr. Christabel talked about, what are some of these targeted interventions, Dr. Jayesh, that are needed perhaps in the community, pharmacy, academia, to just advance PV?
Thank you, Martha. There's a lot that's already been done, yet there is a lot that we can do. Again, I drive my inspiration from the last 2 days. There's been top-notch science. We keep hearing that we are now moving from clinical pharmacy to derma specialist pharmacists. Yesterday evening, we were talking about cardiology specific specialty pharmacies, renal pharmacies, pharmacists, right? So there's a lot that can come down through this. I also believe, this is my personal opinion, a big gap that we have today, and Christabel, you might agree, is the kind of reports that we are getting or not getting from community pharmacies. Community pharmacies are the ones who are right there, right? The retail pharmacists are with the patients. And if we can get something cracked to work with them better, give them easier reporting tools, give them motivation that if you report, then so and so can happen. We need that information coming in, because that then drives academia and research to come up with a topic for research by the students, which will again drive local policy with local data, right? Otherwise, we are copying and pasting whatever is happening from abroad. At the same time, I believe where there is a problem across hospitals and community pharmacies, if you look at market authorization holders, we have no choice, but we have to report, and we are happy to report our cases. Hospitals and community pharmacies, where I've discussed this with several colleagues, there is a fear somewhere down there that what if I report and this backfires on me? Could there be a punitive action, right? I know PPB is trying their level best. All the reporting forms, all our portals very clearly says, you need not be certain, just be suspicious, report. But inherently out there, there is a problem, right? Some people are saying, and whoever is a pharmacist, the pharmacist doesn't mind reporting. But if you go a step higher, the manager, the admin, the owners of the premises is where there can be more work done to encourage them and tell them, look, we are not here to punish, we are here to improve the health of our Kenyans or Africans at large. That's how I look at it. Academia can guide, market authorizations will implement, and regulators will receive. And with that same information, by demystifying this whole thing, I believe we will still be able to have a very robust PV system across Africa.
Thank you. So I cannot let that go about the fear. I'd like Dr. Christabel to give assurance to our esteemed colleagues in here about fear of reporting.
Yeah, so one of the things, just to assure you that whatever reports come are in confidence, and we know right now, even before we had the Data Protection Acts in Kenya, that we are supposed to protect people's information. So usually even when we are working with this data, and as much as we contribute to the global database, we de-identify the data. But the reason why it's important for us to know who is reporting as PPB ourselves, it's because we may need to follow up with you to get information. But just to assure you that even when the reports come, it's only people within the pharmacovigilance unit that access these reports, and not everyone who works at PPB. And just to also what Jayesh has said, like, okay, the market authorization holders know that it's mandatory for them to report, But even as healthcare workers, we also have an obligation to report. And this is what is documented in the Rules 2022 for pharmacovigilance and post-market surveillance. And it's actually, if you do not report, of course, we don't have punitive fines as of now, but we don't know how the government may be going out in the future it will be. But it's better whenever you get an issue, you report, because we've had cases where people sometimes want even to take legal action. So it's better if it was reported and now it's the onus of PPB and maybe the MAH to prove that the drug is actually safer than you having known that the patient experienced an adverse reaction and you kept quiet. That is even worse than if you actually reported and spread the risk to PPB and the MAH than you remaining with the risk and being asked why you withheld information that would have probably been beneficial in helping the patient.
Thank you. So even as we talk about capacity building, I've had in-service, pre-service, but there's this other very important aspect of mentorship. Dr. Masi, tell us something about mentorship, whether we have any existing mentorship programs specifically for PV and how perhaps we can, onboard for those who are interested. Just in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, there's been a lot of discussion, and this was highlighted by, I think, by Dr. David, and the fact that YPG actually require or would want a mentorship. So that has been an overarching theme. So yes, there are ways in which we've tried to develop mentorship within the PV space. Firstly, I know Dr. Eva will speak about CAPI, but CAPI is going to work to train and to mentor local manufacturers within in Kenya to try and develop training for pharmacovigilance. Secondly, in addition to CAPI now working with the local manufacturing, because there's been a local move towards, enhancing local manufacturing, we will get the guys who are actually trained to be a trainer of trainers. So we'll work with also YPG, and these YPG members now will become the ambassadors at university level so that you're able to get a taste of what pharmacovigilance is. So just to explain that again is CAPI, which it's an umbrella body for a lot of the MAHs in Kenya, will work with local manufacturing and YPG, and then YPG will become ambassadors at university level. That is one which is local. Secondly, I would like to highlight the fact that there are programs which are open for Africans. For example, the Africa Compt program, and I know I've interacted with a number of you who've actually applied for it. And this program is a fellowship that gives you the opportunity to go work within German companies. They typically have some positions which are open for regulatory affairs and pharmacovigilance, and therefore that's also an opportunity. A third one I'd want to highlight is the fact that in Kenya now, PPB has required that all manufacturing plants, distributors, MAHs have local QPPVs on board. So when you go for your internship as students, kindly make sure that you request that you are placed with this QPPVs and focal persons for pharmacovigilance so that you can get a taste of pharmacovigilance. So those are the 3 programs that I would want to highlight for mentorship which are available on the African continent and locally.
Thank you so much. So we want to talk about the future of PV. What does that look like? I know there's artificial intelligence, and it would be nice to know, does PV have a place, does AI have a place in pharmacovigilance? Industry perspective, I think that's Mercy.
Okay, yes, I know that there had been a question that was raised about artificial intelligence and its role. My thoughts is we should not be thinking about artificial intelligence as a threat, but actually an accelerator, in the sense that essentially artificial intelligence is building machines that can learn and think and decision make like human beings. And we've seen a lot of research that has been done in terms of its role, which has included benefit risk assessments identification of adverse events and reactions. It's been used to simulate clinical trials, which shortens the amount of time which is taken in drug development, and therefore artificial intelligence is here to stay. A lot of the MAH is actually embracing artificial intelligence to analyze large quantities of data that they're receiving. And I think even Africa as a continent, with the move towards electronic medical records, right, we'll have a lot of data. Remember, a lot of Africans are not included in these clinical trials, and therefore we have large data sets in which we can be able to employ adverse events to try and improve signal management to try and identify which adverse events actually affect the African population. So there's a lot of AI. AI is here to stay. Let's embrace AI is what I would say.
Thank you. Dr. Jayesh, social media, does it have a role in PV?
Very big role. Where I sit, I can tell you the number of people who report, oh, I had a headache with this, and oh, nimeendesha, and oh, this you should use and not use, on social media is much more than what we will get on formal reporting. And that is why social media reporting is an important cornerstone as a market authorization holder that we have to have our eyes on, pick these reports, and this is also an initial report that we have to submit to PPB, right, or to all our authorities. I believe AI is revolutionary. Mm-hmm. We talk about real-world evidence. We talk about the innovations that's going to be there. I had heard many years ago, and I hope this happens true, all the medical records that we've had since you and I were born until we are here today will be kind of put on a printer, on a scanner, and they will easily be picked up and they will be digitized, right? This is what I look at. I believe in Africa, and especially in Kenya, what we are missing is real-time digital health records of the country. Right? So digitalization, social media, looking at AI, I believe this is a game changer. And there are opportunities that are coming up. Don't know if anyone saw my poster yesterday. We are looking at eco-pharmacovigilance, or for the YPGs, for PV 2.0, right? We are looking at where medicines have come from, how are they manufactured, and how are they being disposed. So a proper management and disposal of pharmaceutical waste, because that same dawa is affecting the fishes in our rivers and the cows and the goats and the cuckoos that we get on our plate. And AI is going to drive this information and bring it to us.
Thank you so much. And finally, Dr. Christabel, even as we look at the future of PV, advancing PV in Africa, and in your capacity as you sit as a member, what does AfriVigilance look like? Just 2 sentences.
So, as we are aware about the African Medicines Agency, so we have what is called AfriVigilance. And basically what AfriVigilance is aiming to do is to create a pool of data within the continent on pharmacovigilance. So as a start, it will be looking at priority medicines or priority diseases based on what the countries will sit down and set up. And with the onset of COVID-19 vaccines, we have the African Union Smart Safety Surveillance, which was started. And the focus started with COVID-19 vaccines, so it is like a stopgap measure into the AfriVigilance. But we also take cognizance that we already have global systems in place. So basically what AfriVigilance will do is to collect this data within the continent, but it will still have seamless integration with the Uppsala Monitoring Center, which is the global database that collects this data. And looking at what my colleagues have already said within the artificial intelligence, the AI, like currently in Africa, we have many EHR health records programs, that electronic health records that are there. So with the onset of embracing AI, all this unstructured data, when it's brought together, it's going to play a key role, especially when it comes to signal detection within the continent and even within the countries. And within the AU3S, there's what we call the Joint Signal Management Team, which has already started working in trying to identify signals that might have been generated within the COVID-19 vaccine. So AMA is going to play a key role, and we believe that even the people who are coming up within the space will also get employment, because we'll need people to work at the AMA. So once they make a call for that, please do applications. You never know, you might be the one handling the continent issues on pharmacovigilance in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we are done with this session. I stand guided as to whether there's Q&A or the, okay, so I'm told no. But I think we know our panelists. Thank you so much, Dr. Maina. Thank you, Dr. Jayesh. Thank you, Dr. Christabel.